Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Welcome to our Happy Startup School Excite Strategy Summit, session one, where we're going to be talking about leading with needs. We are recording this for those of you who can't stay with us for the whole session, and we'll be putting this up on YouTube, and we'll be sending you an email after this session with links to that recording so that you can watch it again if you are so inclined, or if you just need to get a recap. While we are just checking in and just getting our legs under the table, there's a little poll, just a quick poll here. I'm going to give you a couple of minutes to answer this poll. Just want to know how many of you have actually heard of the Vision 2020 program that myself and Lawrence are running, which is what a lot of we're going to be talking about over this week is going to be based on. And we're just going to essentially, over the next 4 days, open up a little door to the stuff that we are interested and curious about, and that we explore through our program. Today is Leading with Needs. Tomorrow is Tune into Change. The day after is Make Happy Money. And the last one is Work Out Loud. So if those topics interest you, then make sure 12:30 on the UK time, you're around for 30 minutes, and we're going to be sharing a bit more about those things. In true amateur hour fare, I'm just going to click a button, and I might lose you for a sec because for some reason I started looking at the schedule, and now if I click it, they're going to refresh the screen. No, it doesn't. Brilliant. No. Lawrence, how are you?
Thanks for that preamble. I am good. I'm cleaner than I was about 12 hours ago, coming back from Latitude Festival. Both of us went there with the families at the weekend. And it was so dry and hot, which was great, but that meant it was really sort of dusty and a bit grubby. So I came home like really valuing home comforts. But no, generally good.
Awesome. Yeah, the black bogies all round. Lots of dust. If you're watching live, please say hello in the chat. I saw Paul say hello from Bristol. Hello, Paul. Thank you for joining us. And I saw Warwick as well saying hello in the chat. It would be really nice to just feel that we have everyone's attention. And if you have any questions, please post them in the chat. We'll try and answer them towards the end. The way we're going to cover this short session is we're going to talk about three things. We're going to talk about what it means to lead with needs, and what we think, how we would describe it. We're going to talk a bit about why we believe it's important and why it's at the core of our work. And then the final thing we're going to do is just going to talk through one of the modules on the Vision 2020 program, just a high level overview of what we do, how it works, to give you a picture of our approach to helping people lead with needs. So that's the agenda for the next 28 minutes or so. And if you have any questions, like I said, just post them into the chat, and we can share them. If you're watching the recording, we'll also put the questions in the chat, in the show notes, so you can actually see what questions came up and when. So to begin with, Lawrence, leading with needs. What does that mean to you?
So leading with needs is a phrase I would have not known what you're talking about probably a decade ago, maybe even 7 years ago. But it's I guess a mantra in some ways of how we approach business and how we mentor people really through our programs. And that starts with you. So most people, I think, when they start a business might think about their idea or the company they want to create or this vision they have to change something on the outside world. And that's great and that's helpful. And it's certainly helpful to rally other people around it. But I'd say over the last decade or so, we've realized, having worked with loads of entrepreneurs and founders on this journey, that actually, if you just focus on that, the outside bit, the change you want to make in the world, the problems you want to solve, the people you want to solve them for, sometimes that can come at the cost of your own well-being, your own sanity, your own creativity, your own autonomy. And more often than I'd like to see happen, more often than not, people can start a business for a reason, but they're not 100% clear on those reasons. And so they end up on this path following the outside world and what the outside world wants, and really losing touch with maybe why they started it in the first place. And so, and we've experienced this ourselves. We built a company and it was doing well. And something for me certainly was not right, and I couldn't articulate what that was. And it wasn't like anything was wrong, but something felt like it was missing. And so, having worked with some mentors in our community, we understood, or I certainly got to understand, that actually I had some unmet needs. And as long as those needs would be unmet, there'd be something missing. And by tuning into that, tuning into what those needs are, it then suddenly set my light bulbs off, because it helped to put a language to what I felt was not quite right. And so leading with needs for me is really, number one, being about aware of these things, that I have a need, and maybe this need's being met, and maybe it's not being met. And if it's not being met, can I satisfy that need through the work I do now, or do I need to transition to something that fulfills me in those ways? And so it really gives a language and a lens to look at business through, which in some ways transformed the way I think about business and leadership, really.
Awesome. So I'll expand on that a bit as well, and it's kind of related to how we think about business as working from the inside out. And Lawrence has really accurately described what it means to tap into these inner needs, our own personal needs. But another aspect of this is, which I feel is really important, and we'll probably talk about this a bit more tomorrow, is when you are doing work, or you're trying to think about the work you want to do, or you want to create something, and this creative process that you want to birth something that feels like it's coming out of you, really needs to get out of you. Just talking about it from that perspective of the thing can be challenging for others to understand why it's important. And so really understanding how you understand other people's needs. What is it that they're trying to achieve? Where are they trying to get to with their lives and their professions? Understanding what that journey and the needs are tied to it helps you understand why you're relevant to them and why they're relevant to you. So there's an aspect here of actually building stuff that people actually need, as opposed to just making stuff and then asking people if they like it. And that's a classic thing that we found when we were running our startup studio, where our customers, our clients would come to us and say, oh, we want to make this app, or we want to make this platform. And we would understand, but why? What is important? Part of it was actually what problems you're addressing in the market, but also why do other people need it beyond that? What is the journey that they're on? And then why do you, as the founder, want to make it? What is it about it other than the money? And so this idea of leading with needs is really looking at it, in our eyes, twofold, from this kind of personal perspective, but also practically, when you're making anything, what need are you addressing? Because if there is a need, then there's going to be a motivation to actually use what you're making, and then hopefully pay you some money if you're clever. And we'll be tackling that again in 2 days' time on Wednesday, when we talk about making happy money. So that's what we mean about leading with needs. I thought what would be useful is to start talking about why we believe that, or maybe diving a bit more deeply as to why we believe that's so important. And you touched on this already, Lawrence. I don't know, from your experience of talking to people on our program who've been through it, how have you found it a really important thing to think about?
Well, one thing is, I'd say it's not easy at the start to start working this way. It's like anything, we're used to working in certain ways. And so it takes a practice, number one. It takes people and accountability, I think, at the beginning to remind you of what's important to you. But the first thing is even uncovering what needs you might have. And that is, again, I think, more of a collaborative process than most people might think would be needed, because it's through working through your past, through some of the life experiences you've had, work experiences you've had, business experiences you've had, and working through to understand what is it that actually has made me feel energized and motivated in the past, and maybe likewise things that have drained you of energy in the past and demotivated you, and to understand, what environments, what people do I thrive in and which ones do I struggle in. And that alone, that exercise, which is one of the exercises we set on the program, around your hell yeahs and hell no's, really helps people to start thinking about, actually, when did I feel like I was working at my best, and what was at play then? And for me, that might be around creativity, collaboration, feeling connected to others, and also just being that my zone of genius, which is bringing ideas to life, playing with new ideas and making something work with other people. That's what I love doing. I'm not so good working solo. Apart from writing, I'm not so good on some of the more mundane parts of running the business. No one is, I don't think, but yeah, certainly don't thrive in those things. So understanding in terms of how we work with them, I think is first looking back at your past and understanding how have you worked with them in the past, whether or not you looked at it that way. How can you look at the lens of your work through that, and then understanding what do you want to bring with you going forward, and which things do you maybe want to let go of that aren't helping you.
Just wanted to touch on, we'll put a little question there about people, if how many people here watching live heard about our Vision 2020 program, and a lot of you haven't. So just to give you some clarity, if you go to vision.happystartups.co, you'll be able to find out more about it. But it's a 20-week program that Lawrence and I have been running since the beginning of the pandemic. And it's been a revelation in terms of how we can actually create a lot of connection and help a group of people over a longer journey purely online. And so getting that feeling of connection and learning remotely, but also the people that we've met and the friends that we've made, and the community that is growing around this program is fascinating, all connected, I believe, over this need of doing something that is in alignment. And that kind of leads me on to, for me, the importance of this work is you get to a point in your career or your professional journey where things get tiring, and I think things get draining, and it either becomes a slog that you just push and persist to so that you can get to the other side, whatever the other side means, or things get harder to do, and so you get less creative, and so the work becomes much more challenging, and then it gets a bit of an energetic spiral downwards. And so for us, or personally for me, leading with needs is being able to tune into what is it that's not wrong so that you can do something about it. So you can have some clarity as to, okay, which direction should I go next? And in what I feel is a more uncertain, but also a certain world, but a world full of more opportunities because of so many different ways to do work these days. And the case in point being this past couple of years where everything has shifted online, people are being more aware of what they can do in that environment. Being able to make a decision that you feel confident about, you feel clear about, that you don't necessarily know where you're going to go next, but there's something that's pulling you and makes you feel aligned, I think is really important. And there's the idea of strategy. When we talk about strategy, there's plans and there's strategies. Plans, for me, usually you know exactly where you're going and you've got a sequence of steps to get there. A strategy, in my mind, is you've got an understanding of what the problem is now. Essentially, I'm not feeling quite right, or my career needs to change, or the business needs a new direction, or I'm just not feeling particularly clear about where I'm going to go next. And then you've got some guiding principles to help you know what to do next, because you might not know what step 3 is, but knowing what step 1 is super important. And for us, the guiding principles, one of the main guiding principles, is having this real understanding of what your core needs are, as well as the needs of the market, but what your core needs are. So that's why, for me, understanding or doing this work of just getting a bit of clarity about what those needs are will help you take the next step, whatever that may be, with confidence, even if you're not sure where it'll lead to next. I don't know what you say. Have anything to add on to that, Lawrence?
No, exactly that. I think the way we see it, and maybe I can show a quick, because I've seen Paul's question, might be worth showing a bit of what we mean by this with a playbook. Because one of the assignments we set people on the program is to create your purpose playbook. And this playbook becomes almost like a design brief for your business that you want to build. And it deliberately doesn't go into the ideas that you have for the business, because it's rooted in what's important to you, like Carla said, rooting it in needs. And what that does is creates a foundation that allows you to play from. So you're not necessarily tied to one idea or one solution. You can just check back on this and look, and with your peers, understand how can I actually make decisions that move me towards fulfilling these needs more fully. And so it might close down some doors, but open up a whole load of more fulfilling ones. And that's, I think, where this becomes valuable, is being able to refer to this stuff. And like you said, it's all about alignment, ultimately. How can I move towards work that nourishes me more and that doesn't feel like work, ultimately feels more effortless. And as a result of that, working on your needs, one of the following exercises we get people to do is work on their mantra. And their mantra is really a way to almost capture what they do in that whole first module in a few, 2 or 3 words, ideally. So my mantra is effortless impact. And what that does do is allows me to, like, for example, one of my needs is freedom. so that allows me to, try to simplify my schedule, try to simplify the way I work, try to do that in a way that still makes a difference, but doesn't burn me out. And hopefully it allows me to produce better work by working less. So that allows me to make decisions every day that move me towards fulfilling my needs more than I would have done if I just do that exercise, just like if you might have done something like that before or worked in your values and then you put it in a drawer and you forget about it because that was last year. So I think the trick with all this stuff is how to build a muscle almost where you start to work in this way a little bit more each day.
Yeah. And I think, to sort of pay respect to the people who've influenced or the work that's influenced this work is that it comes back to, for some of you who might know this, nonviolent communication. And I want to mention that because there's this idea of working with needs and how that's connected to this idea of feelings. When we have a sensation in our body or an emotion going through our minds, it's usually tied to a need that's being met or unmet. And that's helping, by working with this work, from my perspective, it's really helpful because it allows you to just step back a bit rather than just react to a situation or to a problem, to a question, to a new direction. Just tuning into, all right, what is this telling me and what is this linked to in terms of what are my needs? The added benefit for this, and I'm thinking in terms of even just a business benefit as a personal relationship benefit, is the more we're able to just understand this connection with feelings and needs for ourselves, the more we're able to understand that that's also happening in other people's worlds, in other people's bodies, in other people's minds. And so when you are building community, having conversations, selling anything, having a difficult, challenging discussion, when you have that awareness that there is actually an internal thing going on for someone else, and they're not just being argumentative for argumentative's sake, or they're not buying your thing just because it costs too much money. There's a story, there's a whole set of things going on for them. When you have that understanding, because you have the understanding of yourself, then work becomes a little less effortful. And going back to Lawrence's idea of the mantra, what we're trying to do is make it more effortless for anyone who does the program.
Just quickly add to that was, a lot of people, we had our graduation for the current cohort 2 weeks ago, and a lot of the reflections from people were that they got what they needed, not necessarily what they came for, and that seems to be something that comes up a lot. And so, like you said, in relation to how do we talk about what we do in a way that is true, it's really understanding what, like you said, what are those needs that are going on for people. And it might be that people's need for belonging and community is actually not something they thought that was important to them, but when they have it, it's really hard to then lose it. And that's the one thing we see is once you have community, particularly a really sort of supportive one, then that becomes your foundation, not something that is nice to have.
And this for me is tying together what we're about at the Happy Startup School, because we spend a lot of time as an agency just working on the tactics and strategies and the external stuff around business, building products, understanding marketing, understanding customers, trying to design things that solve problems, but not linking it to actually what's the personal journey of the entrepreneur and what is the product founder fit? What is it that you are most aligned to do? And so by being able to do some of this internal work, there are practical benefits in all the things that you'll be doing in terms of doing your work in your business. And so that's fascinating for me, and I'm sure also for Lawrence, in terms of being able to marry that introspection with actually getting shit done in the world.
And also telling your story as well. No, I was just going to say, telling your story, as someone who built brands and launched websites for loads of customers in our agency, often it was something people didn't really think was important was their story and how important that might be to the success or not of the business. And so understanding what's driving you, actually, you might not disclose everything, but certainly that will help frame the stories you tell to the outside world. And why is that important? Because you want people to find your products, to care, to become loyal customers. And if you want to build a community, stick around and help you build this mission. So the more open and in some cases vulnerable you can be about what's driving you, often that can lead you to all sorts of great connection with other people. And that's one thing that we help people with is, navigate that path, because it's not just about learning the tools and tactics, it's building the confidence and, overcoming some limiting beliefs around putting ourselves out there and working out loud.
And we'll be talking more about that on Thursday in terms of this idea of working out loud and what we try and get people to do on the program in order to get more comfortable with this. And it's very rooted in empathy and this ability to connect and to do it authentically. And that's another thing, a big word that seems to go around the interwebs these days about being your authentic self. What does that mean? How do I do that without feeling scared shitless of being rejected? So we'll be tackling that on Thursday. So hopefully you'll be able to join us then. In the meantime, we want to talk to you through one of the main sort of challenges that we set people on the program, the purpose playbook. One of the things that a lot of people, well, nearly everyone in the program finds one of the most valuable. And we're just going to share what we do, how it works, just to give you a bit of an insight into this approach of working from the inside out. Lawrence, and also just for those of you who are live, there's a little poll here just to get a feel for the people, how you would identify yourself on the program, either as a career shifter, a founder in transition, so maybe you started the business, you want to start a new one, you're launching a new business from scratch, or you're just a clarity seeker, just wanting that a greater sense of understanding yourself and where to go next. It'd be great if you could answer that poll so we can also talk to you specifically as we go through sharing what it means to create a purpose playbook. And we have a couple of clarity seekers here, Lawrence.
Cool. Well, I don't know if that's a place you get to. I think everyone's always seeking a bit more clarity. It's just maybe a level of where you're at on that journey. So yeah, like Colin said, this is essentially the assignment for the first module of the program. So we've got 4 modules: purpose, product, profit, and promote. And so purpose being the first one. So by the end of the first module, this is the work we ask people to do. And all of these elements of the playbook make up a different challenge that we set each week. And so the first exercise we set is to get people to imagine a future where things are working. And we do that through this quadrant of 4 areas, really: money, time, relationships, and impact. And so this exercise frees us up to sort of dream and to think about how we want to make money, impact, how we want to spend our time, and who we want to spend it with. And this can just open it up to interesting, I guess, reflections about where we're at and maybe things that we want to address. And this is stuff that we work together in groups on, so it's not something you do solo. You might do some solo work, but come together and discuss this stuff. So this kind of, I guess, opens us up to a bit more creative thinking about the future that we want for ourselves and our work. And then what this looks like in ways that we maybe remember. So what success looks like for me is happy money, which we'll talk about, I think, on Wednesday. Quality time with family, doing work I love with people I love. So having playmates to collaborate with and making things. I really love the creative side of entrepreneurship and using my skills in bringing ideas to life. And if I don't do that, then it makes me feel less energized really at work. And so linked to this is the needs we're talking about today. And I think Paul might have mentioned that he had 12 needs or so. So what we would do is get people to work through an exercise where they maybe pick out needs from a list, but then really understanding what the core needs out of that list. And so this is based on me with my experiences of work in the past of understanding where I work best and where I don't. And I, like a lot of people, started a business to have more freedom and autonomy. It's one thing we hear a lot from people on the program, that this is a strong need, because often we might be coming from a job maybe where we don't have much freedom, or maybe we're in a business that we've created, or we have partners that it's just not working anymore. So we feel a bit constrained. And so this idea of having more control of my time and how I spend my time at work is really a big driver for a lot of people. And so understanding that, if we were to, for example, take on a big project that tied me down every minute of every day for 3 months, I know I would get really frustrated and it would just almost destroy my creativity because I'd feel too constrained by that. And again, this is just me. This is not anyone else. And so understanding what drives me and what doesn't really helps me to know what to say yes and no to. Likewise with adventure, if I'm just doing the same thing all the time, then I can get bored quite quickly. And again, we hear this a lot from a lot of the more creative entrepreneurial types in the community, that they like new things, new energy, and balancing that with trying to keep existing things going and not just following the shiny new thing that comes up. So I'm always looking at ways to inject more fun or adventure into what we do each year, just to have a different experience each year and not just be doing the same thing and going through the motions. Presence for me is a big one. So it's easy with distractions like phones and families and kids and all things that go on in our lives to not feel like we're fully present. But for me, I feel most at my best when I'm fully in the moment, being able to have a great conversation with someone or spend time writing and not feel rushed. And that for me is integral to me now in terms of what I want for my life. And then finally, connection. I wouldn't say it's the least important. If anything, it's probably the most important. Feeling like the work I'm doing is worthwhile, is helping people, but also just feeling that connection with others, not being alone and being part of a community and bringing it together is a real gift. And so that's something that I cherish. So that's me. And then the final two parts of the playbook are the zone of genius. So getting you to look at your strengths and superpowers. And again, for me, this is creating experiences. This could be online or offline. So the program or summer camp or altitude retreat, bringing people together, igniting that spark and turning strangers into friends is something that gives me a lot of joy and something I love doing. And then finally, like I said, my mantra, which again takes all of the stuff that we've done before and the work we've done before and turns it into something that's easy to remember. And for me, that just helps to drive all the decisions I make each day. So hopefully that gives you a quick whistle-stop tour. Where are we? Let's close this now. There we go. So yeah, what might be helpful, Carlos, I don't know if any of those needs, how they overlap or don't with your needs, because that might be the question in people's minds, is particularly working with other people. How do those things work together or maybe even collide?
It was interesting that when you use the word connection, I would have used the word either impact or contribution. And it's for me, they're connected as well because of, you can't create impact in the world if there's just you. Well, it's impact on yourself, but it doesn't feel like there's not much contribution going on. And it's interesting, I don't know, then relating to what Paul said, there may be 12 of these things, these words, needs that come up. Some of them, I think, they're always there for me. So one way to look at it, I think they're always there. It's just some become more prominent than others at different stages of our lives. And the really interesting stuff about this work, if you want to go a bit deeper, is that I believe a lot of them become more prominent because of our external situations, about circumstances that are happening in our lives, whether that's maybe not enough money happening, something going on with family, the world, and the how uncertain it might be at a particular moment in time. And so these needs become more prominent. And I think it's being aware that there's a shift based on our circumstances. The really interesting stuff for me is that, but deep down, there are things that rarely shift. They're kind of consistently always there. And that's the inquiry. That's the stuff that's really interesting to do. Because that's the stuff that if you build stuff around those needs, they're kind of perennial and they're going to be always there. That means if you're doing stuff and meeting those needs, you're always going to be energized. So from my own perspective, Paul's now got more than 12. We'll help you whittle those down if you want, Paul. Mm-hmm. From my perspective, learning has always been a massive thing for me, and it's more. And when I think of learning, it used to be about accumulation of knowledge. Sounding clever, but actually, it's around about understanding. It feels like the more conversations I have, the more I read. Some of it makes sense, some of it is useful, but what happens is a lot of it just mishes together and creates a new perspective on the world and how to look at things and how to do things. And so that means the more I do that, the more energized I get, the more I want to do it. And that for me is another important part of these needs things. It becomes a virtuous circle. It becomes the more I do that thing, the more I want to do more of it, and the better I get at it. And that then relates to the superpower stuff. So all of this stuff around the Purpose Playbook, it looks very nice and simple on paper, but it takes a level of courage and vulnerability to work through it. Because if you do it on your own, you'll get to a certain point. But a lot of the time, there's that saying, you can't see the label when you're inside the bottle. And a lot of the times, the things you tell yourself, you either be super critical about them and say, no, they're not right, they're not the right needs, or they're not valuable needs. When you have other people who can reflect what you're saying, it helps you get a level of clarity which will shift so many things for you. So yeah, that's how I would relate to what some of the stuff Lawrence has talked about. Is like there are, and I think this is the most important bit. There are overlaps, and that's one of the reasons why we're co-founders. Is that you will start to see who are the people that you connect to with, and who are the people that complement also some of your needs. Cool. Okay. Anything else before we finish off, Lawrence?
No, I mean, I know we're going to finish in 1 minute, but yeah, I was curious to know if anyone had any questions, because I'm happy to stick around if they did.
Cool.
But yeah, while we're waiting for those, I think for me, this is just an invitation, really, more than anything. All of the sessions we're doing this week are invitations to just look at a lot of the things we're taught about business and work differently. And these are things we've learned on this journey over the last 10, 20 years, is that sometimes we need to reframe the way we think about business, because often the way it's taught in business school is a bit traditional. Doesn't take into account the complexities of people and our needs. And so, yeah, today's session is really an invitation to start working with needs, and just exploring this more, rather than closing down the door to it or trying to change everything tomorrow. Just starting to inquire more about this, like you said, and trying to open that door.
So a question I've had around this is, someone was asking about this idea of, when you've identified your core emotional needs, then how do you use them to guide you? I mean, I think Lawrence has spoken a bit in terms of how he's seen, by identifying his needs, what work to slot into, what things to gravitate towards and maybe to steer away from. And that's a very practical way. But then how you actually do that, what does that mean to do that on an everyday basis? That's something that I find fascinating, and is an ongoing practice for me, because it's being able to, or if you think about the way I think about all the feelings that we have, as if you're in the cockpit of an airplane, and they're all little dials, like fuel gauges, going up and down. So firstly, it's like you can imagine in the cockpit, so many dials, not knowing what the hell any of those dials are. It's like, I didn't even have a label for any of these dials. That thing's like full, but what is it? So those dials for me are the feelings. And so being able to use the language of feelings, so able to name them, not just sadness, anger, happiness, but I don't know, fear and joy, or curiosity, or whatever those other words you can use for feelings, tentativeness. I know, particularly feelings in your body, be able to have those as a way to say, all right, that's what that is, and that's going high because of this. And that for me is interesting, because for someone who's really logically based, I was very conceptually based. I could, for me, it was all about thinking and thinking your way out of a situation, or thinking your way to the next step. Being able to also somehow trust your body and be able to say, okay, it's telling me this, even though all the logical information is telling me that. That for me is why it's important to be able to work with this, and why it's a practice. Because also it's not something that someone can give you a manual and say, this is how you do it. If that dial goes high, go this way. I think it's more of a case that over time of following your feelings and your needs, and then seeing where that leads you, that then is a practice that then you can then use further down the line. So if you're anything like me, and you have you've been really good at school and you're very good at solving problems, but for some reason you find challenging, complicated situations really difficult to navigate, then I would really encourage you to try and investigate the whole needs and feelings aspect of the work, because it will be really, really revelatory for you, if a bit scary to start with. Cool. Okay, I just a final poll before we leave, and just for those of you who are, because we're curious, for us is also the things that people are, that resonate with people on this discussion about an Excite strategy. So the 4 sessions that we're going to be doing is lead with needs, tune into change, make happy money, and work out loud. We'd be curious to see which of these kind of titles resonate, if anything. To give you a brief explanation, you know what lead with needs means, but tune into change, it's really about, rather than when you're making things or thinking about a new idea, rather than just thinking about the features of it, what it looks like, how it works, it's like, what is the whole change that you're trying to make in other people's lives, in your lives, and maybe in the world. So being able to talk to the change rather than just the stuff that you're making. Making happy money. We're going to be talking more about how can you make money, create revenue, get paid, and it to feel good. What does that mean? How do you do that? Because a lot of the time we have challenges around money that we've seen anyway, that people have really some certain beliefs around money. They don't like talking about it. Making it is a bit awkward. So we want to talk about making happy money. So if that's of interest, please vote for that, because we're interested to see how many of you are interested in each of these topics. And then working out loud is really about how do you get started talking about the stuff you want to do before you're ready. How can you start talking about the journey of the work you want to create, even the products you want to make, before you've even made them? How can you actually talk about your own journey in public to help not only give you clarity, but also start to connect, like Lawrence was saying, create this empathic connection with people who resonate with the stuff that you're going through and the things that you're thinking about, and then what that means in terms of building a business that feels effortless and exciting.
Oh, we've got a winner.
Oh, lots of people interested in working out loud. Thank you very much for voting.
Normally anything with money in it gets the most votes, doesn't it? But yeah, on this occasion, maybe everyone's good.
Awesome. If you are interested, if any of this stuff resonates, if any of this stuff is something that you would love to work on yourself, and in the company of others, and with the help of myself and Lawrence and our wonderful collaborator Lana Yelenev, who is an expert in experience design, curriculum design, community building, and she's an all-round lovely person. If anyone knows anything about empathy, it's Lana. So if that was of any interest to you and you would like to explore a bit more, find out more about what it's like to be on the program, just the experience of it as well as what it's about, please click on the green button. It says register for our Vision 2020 Open Day, which is on this Friday at 2 p.m. UK time. It'll be a 2-hour session, and it's 2 hours because we want you to experience what it's to be like to be on the 2020 program. We'll be doing some little exercises, as well as getting you to meet other people who've been in the program in the past or who will be on the program in the future. Cool. Any final word, anything else to leave them with, Lawrence, before we say goodbye?
No, like I said, really, just to, hopefully join us for the rest of the week. We've got 3 more of these sessions before the open day. So yeah, we'd love to carry on the conversation. And it's nice to see people talking in the chat, because I think often we found the community builds at these moments on these sessions. So yeah, my invitation is to keep showing up, and hopefully even just in 30 minutes each day, get a little bit further towards where you want to be. Yeah, a little bit of Lawrence and Carlos love every day this week. 12